does our tap water come from?
Where does our shower water come from?
Hey kids, how are you? Do you know where the water in our homes comes from? I can hear some of you saying from the reverse osmosis, and others are saying from underground. Well done, all of you. But there's so much more to it.
Is it true that the reverse osmosis water comes from the sea?
But that's salty.
If you remember, last time we spoke about underground water and how our aquifers were formed. Do you still remember what we call the aquifers on our islands?
Purged aquifers.
The water that gathers about the blue clay layer.
And mean sea level aquifers.
That's where the fresh water rests on top of the salt water that comes through the rocks.
We use pumps to pull up the fresh water through deep holes that go all the way down to our aquifers. When it comes to reverse osmosis though, the whole process doesn't start with rainwater stored inside our rocks. It actually starts with salty water from the sea.
Do you mean the sea that we actually swim in?
Not exactly. Last time we mentioned that even seawater penetrates our rocks. So, we dig holes into the rocks next to the coast, and from there, we extract seawater that would have already penetrated the rocks.
But how do we take the salt out of the water?
Water is made up of tiny molecules, which are so small that in one single drop of water, there are more molecules than there is sand in all the beaches of the whole world.
Wow!
In order to purify the extracted underground salty water, it's pushed through a membrane. This membrane will be in the shape of a cylinder with tiny, tiny holes. They're so small that you can't even see them with the naked eye. When the salt water is pushed through this membrane, all the tiny water molecules pass through it without a problem. But the salt molecules are too big, so they get left behind.
So, it's like a colander.
My mom uses a colander to drain the water from our pasta.
Exactly. But this colander doesn't only stop the salt from passing through, it even stops bacteria and viruses. The holes in these membranes, or colanders, are actually 2,500 times thinner than any hair that you have on your head.
So the water that comes out is good enough to drink?
Not quite yet. For our drinking water to be good for us, it must have certain minerals in it. Even though we only need small quantities, these are essential for our good health. But unfortunately, even these minerals are removed when the water is pushed through the reverse osmosis filters. So we need to put them back in. And do you know where we find these very important minerals?
No.
In the water that we pump up from underground.
What? How?
Many of these essential minerals can be found in the ground. And like we said last time, when the rainwater seeps through the ground, it absorbs these minerals too. Also, if you remember, we even mentioned that this is why it's important that we don't litter and pollute, because it could contaminate our groundwater.
Yes.
This is why once we remove all the bacteria and chemicals from the water that we've extracted from our aquifers, we mix it in with our reverse osmosis water and store it in large reservoirs. This mixture of groundwater and reverse osmosis water is now good for drinking.
My dad says that they even put chlorine in tap water.
What is chlorine?
For the water to reach our homes, it must pass through wells, pumps, and many pipes. Even though it would be purified, it could pick up some bacteria along the way. These bacteria can make it unfit for drinking, and if we do drink it, they could even make us sick. Chlorine is a chemical that stops these bacteria from spreading. To kill the bacteria, all we need is about 1 teaspoon for every 2,500 liters of water. This way, the water that reaches our homes is safe to drink.
My father always tells us not to drink water from our bathroom taps. Why? Isn't it good?
Your father's right. That water comes from the tank on your roof. And even though it originally came from the mains water supply, like your kitchen water, because it spends some time in your tank, it can develop bacteria like Legionella.
What's that?
Legionella is a type of bacteria that is found in natural water, like spring water or lakes. If you consume any Legionella bacteria, it could make you sick, and you could even end up in hospital.
But how would this bacteria end up in our water tank?
If your water tank isn't covered, or the water is left there for a while, like for example in our summer houses, some insects like mosquitoes could reproduce in it. That's how Legionella can end up in your water.
So we can't use the water from our water tank?
As long as we take care of it, we can use our tank water for nearly everything. To wash stuff, to wash ourselves, for flushing toilets. But it's not good for us to drink, cook, or even wash fruit with.
Now I understand. We should only drink and cook with water that comes directly from the main supply.
Exactly. I better be going now, kids. Always remember that water is precious and we mustn't waste it.
This project is part-financed by the European Union under the Cohesion Fund, European Structural and Investment Funds 2014-2020.